And in particular, we're going to talk about the All-Star game and how, the most popular event that went down in the All-Star game, which was the three-point competition. And the three-point competition went down on Saturday at 9 o'clock, and the participants, they went up against each other. But the most popular thing about the contestants going up against each other was that afterwards, whoever, after the three-point contest, after they decided the winner, there was a special round towards the end, which was Stephen Curry versus Sabrina, which was arguably the most popular event that went down in the three-point competition. And it was one of the most, if I just look at it real quickly, it was one of the most popular three-point competitions, as there were in 4 years, there were 10 million unique viewers that were drawn into this competition, and the three-point contest has become a lot more popular in its previous years. And with this competition, given how it attracted 10 million unique viewers, it's only grown and grown a lot more since, especially with the competition that was in place here. And with how the three-point shot evolves in basketball, and how its popularity evolves in basketball, so will this three-point competition and the contest as a whole. And especially now, where it's the first time in the history of basketball that an NBA player gets matched up against a WNBA player in the three-point competition. And we've been wanting this type of matchup for the longest time. We've always wanted to see what would happen if an NBA player were to go up against a WNBA player, or in a 1v1 in any type of competition, because the NBA would never allow that for the longest time. And a lot of people didn't understand why, or a lot of people didn't want to really say why, and that was because the skill gap between a lot of the basketball players in the NBA was way different than the skill gap in the WNBA. And it wasn't just fans that were saying this. A lot of players were saying this, and coaches of some of these players were saying this. I mentioned this in a previous podcast, how the women's basketball head coach for Team USA said that he would pick DeMarcus Cousins to win in a 1v1 as opposed to Brittany Griner. And with that in mind, it puts a lot of perspective if a player that coaches you says that you don't have what it takes to beat an NBA player. Like, it might be seen as a little biased because of gender, but in reality it's not. Like, at a glance it might, but in reality it's not, simply because of how skilled the NBA has become now recently in a lot of their competitions. But this is the first time that we get an actual competition between an NBA player and a WNBA player, and I will say that it did not disappoint in the slightest. However, the three-point competition in itself, it might have disappointed. There was Karl Anthony Towns, for some reason, like, his foot was on the line. He was taking long twos instead of threes, but they still counted them as threes. And a lot of people on Twitter were like, oh, these shouldn't count because his foot was on the line. And they technically shouldn't. But again, like, it was the All-Star game. A lot of people weren't really paying attention to the rules, which is one of the things and one of the reasons why a lot of these games aren't necessarily, like, that competitive. And a lot of these competitions, like, they aren't taken that seriously, simply because it's like, oh, all of these players, it's like they aren't really listening to the rules. The refs aren't listening to the rules. So why should we bother watching a game when no one is going to listen to these rules? But let's talk about the winner of this, of the competition. Dame ended up winning the three-point contest, so now he is back-to-back three-point champion. And if I was Doc Rivers, I would be really, really upset, because Damian Lillard was able to win in the three-point contest, but in the regular season, his three-point shooting has been less than good, in my personal opinion, especially with how he's known to shoot the ball. Again, two-time three-point shooting contest champion, and he's having difficulty shooting the ball. If I was Doc Rivers, I would be very, very upset. But I mean, he was able to hit when it counted, I guess, even though a lot of people don't really like to count the three-point contest, but he ended up winning the contest. And I was close to getting a lot of the contestants right. Karl Anthony Towns was in the finals, as well as Trae Young. I said previously I wasn't a big fan of Karl Anthony Towns, but he ended up making the finals, so props to him on that. And Trae Young was really close to winning the entire thing until Dame ended up scoring a 26 on the final rack, and that resulted in him getting the win. And afterwards, we were treated to a special match between Steph Curry and Sabrina, where Sabrina ended up... It looked like Sabrina was going to win, but then Steph Curry came out and just completely... He did his thing. He made the three-point competition look like it was just a video game. And Sabrina shot from the regular three-point line as well, which is still, it is very impressive, given how she said she was going to shoot from the line, so the NBA decided to change the rules so that way she shot from the line. She still used a WNBA ball, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter, because, she shot from a lot farther than where she usually shoots, and she ended up tying the competition. All of the highest scores from the night were all 26 points from all of the other three-point shooters. Sabrina ended up getting 26 on her very first rack. And in the first round, she tied Damian Lillard's last round, the last game-winning round. So obviously, that is very, very impressive coming in from Sabrina. But it wasn't enough to stop Steph Curry, who ended up getting a 29 on his first rack. And as a result, since it was just one round between the two players, he ended up winning the competition, and Sabrina ended up getting a lot more respect from a lot more viewers, given how popular the All-Star weekend isn't really watched, the competitions aren't that watched. The three-point contest is one of the most watched, and she did it in front of a lot of viewers. Like I said, 10 million new viewers to the three-point contest. So that brings a lot of notoriety to the WNBA, and that is sort of something that the WNBA needs. And if you notice, the WNBA, it sort of lacks that kind of star, and the NBA didn't take off until they were able to get a star for themselves in Michael Jordan. A player that just made the game look ridiculously easy. And those kind of players were the players that a lot of new fans would gravitate towards, because, again, they would make the game look so easy. And having someone like Michael Jordan being the catalyst for the NBA definitely helped the NBA grow in terms of viewership, in terms of notoriety, all of those kinds of things. And that's the same thing that the WNBA sort of needs. And that's why the NBA implemented this new competition, to bring a lot more attention to these WNBA players and these women players who are really good at basketball and who are probably going to make the WNBA, like Caitlin Clark. Those players like that are those kinds of players that need to bring the notoriety that the WNBA needs, and as well as keep the NBA All-Star Weekend and things of that nature a little bit more entertaining. Because, again, this being new, a lot of people were tuning into this because it was a brand new addition to the All-Star Weekend, and it was, again, the fact that it was a three-point contest helps it out even more, because three-point contests are always really relatively easy to follow, and I wouldn't necessarily say that they determine players' skill, but they sort of do. in the sense that they determine a player's consistency in being able to shoot in a loaded stadium, in a loaded crowd, with all of those people and all of those cameras flashing in your eyes. And again, Steph Curry and Sabrina, they made it look like it was a video game. So it was a great competition overall. And how I mentioned previously, Sabrina, they need that kind of player in the WNBA. And they already have several players like that in the NBA. They just need to bring that kind of player to the WNBA. And like, I don't really watch the WNBA that much, but this is definitely encouraging me to want to watch the WNBA's games a little bit more, simply because of like the overall skill of some of these WNBA players and how it's increasing. And I mean, if they're able to shoot the ball like this, like, I'm going to want to watch a lot more of that, because in the NBA now, like, a lot of teams, like, you know, they shoot the ball and like that, but they don't really have that many automatic 3-point shooters like they do with Steph Curry and Sabrina. Like, it, again, like I said earlier, they make the game look easy, and while a lot of other players, they do make the game look easy, they take a lot of shots. Now, I'm not going to say that Steph Curry doesn't take a lot of shots, but again, Steph Curry makes a lot of shots as well, and they go in with a lot more consistency, and it's the fact that he doesn't really shoot that many free throws. So, free throws slowing the game down is another unpopular thing with basketball, and that's why Embiid isn't necessarily popular, despite the fact that he is one of the most unguardable players in the league. It's another reason why Kyrie Irving gets a lot of praise, because he doesn't necessarily attempt that many free throws either, and he goes for shots that are increasingly difficult, but he makes it look easy. And those are the kinds of players that draw in new players to the game, when they do things and they make it look easy, and they do things that we don't really see before, which is why the All-Star game and the dunk contest tend to be so boring, because we tend to see a lot of the same things that we usually do in those type of competitions. And it's like bringing new things. It's sort of like it brings a lot more viewership to these competitions, because it's like, oh, they changed the format. Let's see how it plays out. It brings in a lot more viewers. And not only that, there's sort of like a lack of competition around some of these competitions, like the skills challenge, which happened just before the 3-point competition. That was really, really bad. Anthony Edwards was shooting with his left hand. Like, he didn't care about that game. And so it was like, why should I care about watching him if he's not even going to try to compete to the best of his ability? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But again, with this competition, with the 3-point contest, Steph Curry, he made this thing look like a 2KU shootout. So did Sabrina. They would have beaten everybody in the competition had they would have participated in that. And it's things like that that people want to tune into the contest, because of how amazing that these players actually are, and how ridiculous they make the game look, and how easy it makes it look, and how it makes the games a little bit less boring, because they make a lot of these difficult shots. And speaking of boring games, since we are out of time for this first segment, we're tune into the second segment, where I go ahead and I talk about the All-Star game, which was very, very disappointing this year. So tune in for that after the second segment. I will be right back after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind, 'cause everybody in the world